If anyone told me that one day a birthday cake would become the centerpiece of my family's destruction, I don't think I would have believed it. But it was right there, on that frost-bitten January night, in the small rented hall in Salem, Massachusetts, for my father's 50th birthday, that the whole foundation of my life cracked open. The air buzzed with the scent of roast beef, store-bought decorations, and a silence, thick and awkward, reserved for families who pretend better than they love. My father was the guest of honor, nervously smiling as old friends and distant relatives gathered around. My mother darted between tables, making sure the food was hot and the napkins all lined up. My younger brother, Will, tried to duck out of sight behind his phone, lost in a world where family didn't feel like cracking glass. But the real force in the room was my grandmother, Clarice. Her wild white hair was pinned up in a bun, and she wore her usual sharp black dress, deceptively elegant. If you dropped your guard, she would slice you open with a single comment, delivered with that Bostonian chill that could curdle cream. People said she was sick, but she stalked that party like a hungry wolf, her purse clinking with prescription bottles that nobody in the family dared to question. I saw her add something to her drink. Just a flick of the wrist, a Glenton pill dissolved in a gulp of golden whiskey. Nobody seemed to notice. That night her eyes were brighter, her tongue sharper, and for the first time I felt real fear around her. The first crack came while everyone gathered by the birthday cake. My father fumbled through a toast, his voice getting lost under the awkward clapping of people who didn't really want to be there. Clarice raised her glass, smirked, and called out, "Well, here's to 50 years, Greg. Too bad only half of them were worth a damn." The room went dead quiet. Nobody expected Clarice to say anything at all, let alone launch a verbal grenade. My dad laughed nervously, trying to brush it off. "Oh, Mom, let's not," he started. But Clarice cut him off. "Let's not what? Pretend? We've been pretending in this family since before your hair turned gray, Greg." It was the kind of moment where you can physically feel everyone's heartbeat speeding up. Even the kids put down their phones. It wasn't just a mean comment. There was steel in her tone, the kind that told you she was just getting started. "Sophie, why don't you come here, sweetheart?" she called to my mother, who smiled politely but looked like she wanted to melt into the floor. "Come say a few words for your charming husband. Unless, of course, you'd rather share how you kept the house running with that secret account of yours." I'll never forget the way my mother's face drained of color. "Mom, please," I whispered, but it was too late. Clarice had drawn blood and the scent was in the air. "Oh, come on," she laughed. "Who here didn't notice Sophie was always one step ahead with the money? She's smarter than all of us. That's why she knew exactly when to stash money away, especially when Greg started dipping into college funds for his little business deals." At that, my dad's jaw clenched, and a hush spread over our relatives, some of whom shifted nervously in their seats. My brother Will whispered, "Is she for real?" I nodded, unable to find words. The rest of the night would unravel like a string pulled too tight, each confession and accusation tossing years of secrets out into the air, until breathing felt impossible. Even now, when I close my eyes, I can still hear my grandmother's voice, thin and hungry, tearing at every bond we thought we had. But the real storm hadn't even started yet. "Should we go after her?" Will asked, his voice breaking my trance, just as Clarice picked up her glass again, eyes locked on another target. And as I wondered if this nightmare could get any worse, she smiled, gave a little nod, and said just loud enough for everyone to hear, "Let's talk about what nobody dares to discuss." That's when I realized my family was about to be changed forever, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. If I could freeze time, I would have stopped everything right before Clarice uttered those words. But her voice sliced through the room, carrying with it a force that opened old wounds faster than most people can notice the bleeding. She tapped her glass, stood, and paced to the center of the room where the cake icing had started to melt. "You all want to know what's really worth a damn in this family?" Her voice echoed with a strange authority. "Let's talk about loyalty. Not the kind you brag about at Christmas, but the ugly, real kind that lives in shadows." She turned to Uncle Martin, who stood rigid by the drinks table, his wife gripping his arm tightly. "Martin, did you tell her about the loan you defaulted on? Or how much you borrowed from Greg to keep your kitchen renovation going? Or is that just another secret you'll take to your grave? Martin's face twisted in panic. I paid it back, Ma. I swear it. But Clarice ignored him, moving on to Aunt Lila. Lila, sweetie, just because you light a candle every Sunday doesn't mean you're an angel. We all know about your little rendezvous with Pastor Williams. How's it feel to betray a sister and a god in the same breath? Lila gasped, her eyes filling with tears. The room was shrinking, the oxygen being sucked out by fear and shame. Even my father tried to break in. Mom, enough. This isn't the time. But Clarice wheeled on him. Not the time? 30 years of secrets and nobody ever wants it to be the time. She looked at my oldest cousin, Hannah, who seemed to shrink under the weight of Clarice's gaze. Hannah, do your kids know your real father isn't the man you were married to? Hannah shook her head, spilling a tear onto her dress. The walls around us felt like they were closing in. Each revelation was like a slap, but worse was the way everyone just stood there, trapped by the horror of it all. My mother tried to grab Clarice's arm. Please, Mom, sit down. This isn't helping. Clarice pulled away, sneering. Helping? You're all so used to hiding behind lies. You think honesty is poison. She reached for her drink again, swaying just slightly. I realized then she didn't just want to destroy us. She wanted to purge herself, unleash every bitterness she'd swallowed in silence. And since we're tossing around truths, Clarice hissed, let's not forget about Benedict. Married, 4 kids at home. Poor Carol, thinking you were just late at work. How's Keith doing these days? Still the man you wish you could be with? There was a gasp. From Benedict's wife, Carol. She stared, first at him, then at her mother-in-law, realizing the decades of normalcy she'd built might have been a farce. Benedict stammered, Ma, please. But Clarice only laughed. Her laughter was shrill, cutting, but inside it I heard something else, a strangled kind of grief. Secrets, she spat. That's the real family business. Lies and cover-ups, passed from parent to child like heirlooms. My dad looked like he was going to shatter. My mom was on the verge of tears. Even Will, usually unfazed, looked lost. Can we leave? He whispered. I don't want to be here anymore. I took his hand, but my own was shaking. Clarice's voice lowered, dangerously calm now. No one here is blameless. Not you, Greg, with your mistress in New Hampshire. Not Sophie, with her secret account. Not even you kids. Do you think I don't know what you get up to? Sneaking out at night and lying about your grades? She pointed at Will, and for a moment I thought she'd reveal something none of us knew. But instead, she sat back down, almost triumphant, as though cleansing herself with cruelty. And as the minutes crawled past, a feeling settled in the pit of my stomach. A nauseating realization that my family would never be whole again. The evening was unraveling faster than anyone could patch it up. That was the moment I decided. If my family was going to burn, I wasn't going to let it take me with it. I looked around, taking in the raw faces, the tears, the fists clenched in laps, and I wondered, was there anything left to save? Or was this the end of the lie we called home? Before we move on, I want to pause for a moment. If any of this hits close to home for you, if you've ever watched your own family fall apart over secrets no one wanted to face, I hope you know you're not alone. Sometimes just hearing stories like these can make the pain a little less isolating. If you feel seen, or if there's a story you want to get off your chest, share it in the comments. And if you think this story matters, stick with me. Your support is the reason these stories come to life, and I'm grateful that you're here. Silence hung in the hall like a storm cloud that refused to break. For the first time, I saw my father, Greg, reduced to a shell of the man who used to hoist me onto his shoulders at the 4th of July parade. He tried to steady himself, pulling my mother aside in a futile effort to piece together what was left. Sophie, did you really have a secret account? He whispered so low I barely caught the words. My mother's hands shook as she clutched her necklace, eyes darting across the room. Greg, after everything, did I have a choice? The exhaustion in her voice was real. The sound of someone who's spent years patching holes in a sinking ship. Across the hall, Will quietly slipped out the back door, the cold Massachusetts air slapping him awake. I found him huddled by the dumpsters, shivering in his thin jacket. He wouldn't look at me. "Can we just leave?" he asked again, voice tighter than before. "I don't care if they notice. I just want out." I wrapped my arms around him. "I know, Will. But if we go now, it'll only get worse. Dad needs us. Even if he can't say it." Somewhere inside, I believed it. Or maybe I had to. Inside, the chaos was just beginning to bloom. Carol's voice echoed through the hall, trembling with fury. "Why would you do this to us, Clarice? Why now?" Clarice leaned back in her chair, almost relaxed, the look of a woman who'd finally finished a long, bitter confession. "You all raised your glasses like you actually cared about each other. What's a family built on? Huh? Lies, money, and a whole lot of looking the other way." Her voice softened, unexpectedly. "At least now you know who you're really toasting." Martin, whose pride had been shattered, stood up, fists clenched. "I've had enough. You want the truth, Ma? Everybody in this town knows you were never half as tough as you pretend. Dad left because he couldn't stand the way you destroyed everything you touched." Clarice only smiled, like she'd won some contest nobody else knew they were playing. "He left because he was already broken. I just refused to let him hide anymore. And so should all of you." The party dissolved into fractured conversations, hissing whispers in corners, accusations and apologies ricocheting through the crowd. Aunt Lila sobbed in the bathroom. Uncle Martin stormed outside for a cigarette he'd supposedly given up years ago. My cousins held each other, some numbed, some angry, none unscathed. I stood at the center, feeling lost and terribly, painfully awake. It hurt to see my family's secrets paraded for everyone to see, but somewhere underneath all that ruin, I understood. Nothing would ever be the same. And maybe that wasn't all bad. Then, as people started drifting toward the exit, muttering about ruined evenings and wasted dinners, I caught a glimpse of Clarice, alone at her table, staring at her empty glass. Something in her eyes looked too sad, like she had wanted forgiveness, but didn't know how to ask. I walked over, heart pounding. "Why did you do it?" I asked, voice barely more than a whisper. Clarice laughed, but her eyes stayed fixed on her hands. "Because somebody had to, darling. Secrets will make you sick if you never let them out." I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry. But I just stood there, watching her, wishing I could understand how cruel love could get. As I walked away, my father motioned me over. "Go find your brother. We need to go home. We need to figure out what comes next." I didn't know what he meant, but as we left that shattered room behind, I realized our real challenges had only just begun. What happened when we got home was something none of us could have prepared for, and in that moment, the true size of the storm that Clarice had unleashed became terrifyingly real. We drove home in silence, the only sound the gentle hum of tires on icy asphalt and the occasional sniffle from my brother. My mother stared straight ahead, knuckles white on the steering wheel. Dad sat in the passenger seat, his shoulders hunched, his mouth locked in a grim line. When we pulled into the driveway, he turned to my mother with a sharpness I hadn't heard before. "I want the truth. All of it. Tonight." My mother, heartbroken but proud, didn't flinch. "Fine," she whispered. "I'll tell you everything. But you have to be ready." Will and I sat on the stairs while they went into the study, their voices blending into a tense blur. Will finally spoke, quietly. "Do you think they'll split up?" I shook my head because it hurt too much to say yes. But the house felt different, like Clarice had opened a window and let in a winter that would never leave. Suddenly, the door opened, and my father stepped out. His eyes were red, his face flushed. "Kids, pack a bag. We're going to be staying in a hotel tonight." My mother didn't argue. At the hotel, I watched my family splinter. Dad closed himself off in his room, refusing to answer our silent questions. Mom stared at the TV, not really watching, her mind miles away. Will turned to me in the dark. "Do you think this ever gets better?" I squeezed his shoulder. "I don't know, but we have each other. That has to count for something." I didn't believe it, not then. But the next morning, my father called us into the room. His voice was rough. "I'm going to file for divorce. I can't live with what I found out. I love you two, And that won't change. But your mother and I are done. Will broke. For the first time, I saw my little brother cry like a child. I held him, the reality squeezing the air from my lungs. Mom stayed quiet, eyes brimming with tears she refused to let spill. That day, as we packed up to leave the hotel, my life split right down the middle, before and after Clarice's party. I wondered if my grandmother meant to do this, if her twisted sense of honesty was meant to be a gift, or just one last act of revenge before her world ended. She called that afternoon, her voice raspier than usual. "Well, I guess you all know the truth now," she sighed, half apologetic, half proud. "It'll hurt for a while, but maybe you'll find freedom in it too." I wanted to scream at her, wanted her to understand what she'd taken from us, but all I did was hang up, letting her words float in the empty room. Divorce proceedings began the next week. Friends and neighbors started calling, the rumors now public knowledge. My mother moved into a small apartment. Dad stayed in the house. Will and I shuffled between homes, trying to stitch together a new normal. "How are you holding up?" Dad would ask when he made pancakes on the weekends. I always answered, "I'm fine, Dad," even though my chest ached every time. But life, as always, demanded we keep going, even as the pain lingered, even as the world seemed colder than before. And then, something happened that changed everything again. I got a call that forced me to confront Clarice one last time, uncovering secrets I never wanted to know. The voicemail came unexpectedly on a cold March morning, a hospital nurse asking me to come see my grandmother. Clarice had been admitted overnight. Something with her heart, made worse by all those pills paired with her infamous whiskey. I almost didn't go. Part of me thought she deserved to sit with her regrets. But something my father once said echoed in my head. Family finds you even when you don't want to be found. So, I went. I found her sitting up in a hospital bed, her eyes as sharp as ever despite the IV in her arm. She tried to smirk, but the effort made her wince. "Tough crowd the other night, huh?" she said, her voice barely more than a whisper. "You destroyed us, Grandma," I replied, surprised at how steady I sounded. She didn't flinch. "I ruined the lie, not the people," she murmured. "There's a difference." I wanted to argue, to throw her cruelty in her face, but something in her eyes, fear, maybe, or sorrow, stopped me. She motioned for me to come closer. "I never told this to anyone," she began, "but lies nearly killed me. Your grandfather wasn't the man you think. Why do you think he left? Why do you think your mother hoards secrets?" Her voice trailed off. "We all learn survival from the people who hurt us the most. I had to break you so you'd know the truth." Tears stung my eyes. "You think this is how you teach someone to be strong?" She shrugged. It worked, didn't it? There was no comfort in her words, but I began to see a hint of warped love in them, a nameless yearning to break the cycle, however terrible her method. Later, as I walked out, I realized the family I left behind that night would never exist again. Maybe that was the point. What I didn't expect was that facing Clarice would force my own reckoning. In the weeks that followed, I discovered truths about myself and my brother, resentments, fractured loyalties, and, ultimately, an unexpected strength that pulled us back together, piece by painful piece. School grew harder to focus on, and Will started skipping classes, caught up in his own anger at the world. Friends we'd known since childhood drifted away, unsure what to say. But my mother leaned into her work, moving up at her job, while my father, slowly, awkwardly, found his own way back to us, making Sunday dinners with less tension each week. Through it all, I carried Clarice's words like a wound that refused to heal. One night, Will finally opened up. I don't get why she did it. I don't even want to know everything she said was true. I stayed quiet, letting him talk, and for the first time, we really listened to each other. "We have to be better than this," I told him, "or we'll just end up like all of them." He nodded, wiping his face, and somehow, tentatively, we found a kind of peace. As months passed, the family scattered. Martin's wife filed for separation. Lila left town for a fresh start. Cousins split into new alliances. But a strange thing happened. When the pretending was gone, so was the pressure to keep up masks. I visited Clarice again, this time not with anger, but with a question. "Are you scared?" She looked away. Every day, she admitted. But being honest is the only way I know to atone for all the waste. Maybe you'll find a better way. That night, as I left her hospital room, I wondered if forgiveness was possible for someone who blew up everything in the name of truth. All I knew for certain was that her explosion had forced us all to reckon with ourselves. And maybe, just maybe, that was worth the pain. A year passed since my father's birthday, and life slowly took on new patterns. My parents never got back together, but as time healed the sharper edges, they learned to speak with kindness, even if love was gone. Will finished high school, I moved away for college, and we found a fragile solidarity in the mess. Family holidays were smaller, intimate. There were fewer guests, but more truth in every word. No more hidden affairs, no more whispered accusations. Just a tired honesty we all had to learn the hard way. One afternoon, not long before Clarice passed, she called me and asked if I would visit. I sat by her bed, and she reached for my hand. Her grip was weak, but her eyes held the fierce pride I remembered. "Don't waste time hiding," she said. "It costs too much. And love, real love, is braver than people think." She squeezed my hand, and for a moment, I believed her. Maybe, in her own broken and bitter way, my grandmother wanted a legacy of truth, not destruction. When she was gone, I missed her terribly. Flaws, fire, and all. Looking back, I sometimes wonder if our family could have survived without her storm. Maybe. But the truth was, Clarice's darkness forced us all into the light, whether we liked it or not. I carry that lesson with me still. The knowledge that even ruin can carry seeds of hope if we're willing to see them. If this story found you at a time when you needed it, I want to thank you for letting me share it. You've stayed with me through every storm, every reveal, every hard-won moment of peace. I hope you know your story matters too. If you feel like sharing, tell us in the comments below, or suggest a story you need to hear next. Your voice gives meaning to stories like mine. Thank you, truly, for making me feel less alone.